Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime and Wine. As always, my name is Ariona, or Ari to the YouTube fam, and I cover true crime stories that have inspired the making of movies. If by the end of today's video you've enjoyed today's content, then please hit the subscribe and like button, and I'd love to hear your comments, so leave them in the comments section below. The Serpent is an 8-part limited series British crime drama that was released on Netflix in 2021. It's written by the British writer Richard Warlow, who focused on dramatizing the true crime story of serial killer Charles Sobhraj, who murdered young tourists from 1975 to 1976. It's crazy because in my personal opinion, I think the cast looks uncannily similar to the actual criminals of this case. But if you watch or have watched the show, then let me know what you think about that. Anyways, I highly recommend you give this series a watch, especially if you like binge watching TV shows. It's a show that's short enough for you to binge watch, but also it's long enough and interesting enough to keep you hooked. One thing I really admire about the writer of the show is that, as he stated in a Vanity Fair interview, he didn't want to glamorize the perpetrator, but rather he wanted to focus on the unlikely hero, who was Herman Nippenberg, who was a 31-year-old junior diplomat in his country's embassy in Bangkok, who ultimately brought down the master manipulator, Charles Sobhraj. Charles Sobhraj was born in Vietnam in 1944 to a Vietnamese mother and an Indian father. His father was a wealthy businessman, but his parents were never married, and his father ended up denying paternity of Charles and ultimately ended up abandoning the family when Sobhraj was just a child. Which left his mother to raise him and his siblings alone. Sobhraj was later taken in by his mother's new husband, a French army lieutenant stationed in French Indochina, where he would later move back and forth between Southeast Asia and France with the family. Sobhraj did not adjust well to life in France though, and he became involved in petty crime. He was arrested several times for theft and other offenses, and Sobhraj's criminal behavior continued into adulthood, and he eventually fled to Asia to avoid prosecution in France. It was there that he began to engage in more serious criminal activities. These criminal activities would later make him notorious and known by names such as the Bikini Killer and the Serpent by the press after he became the subject of an Interpol manhunt in 1976. Sobhraj preyed upon unsuspecting hippies, drug smugglers, and other travelers in India, Nepal, and Thailand, spiking their drinks, stealing their valuables, and brutally murdering them. He then traveled using their passports, so it wasn't always apparent that his victims were missing.
And what you would do is pick a person or a couple, drug them.
Yes, that's correct.
Take their passport and any valuables they might have and move on.
That's correct.
How many times do you think you did that?
I did so many times as I've had.
20? 120?
Maybe 100.
Some of Charles's crimes were seriously so unimaginable. Like, the true crimes he committed were so surreal that even the director of the show didn't even want to add some of those actual crimes that Charles committed, purely based on the fact that he just felt that people wouldn't believe that's what happened. Of course, with my channel being primarily focused on the true crime stories that have inspired the making of movies, the reason I started this channel is because oftentimes movies over-dramatize the actual true crime story, and it definitely is an injustice to the real-life victims. So for a director of a show to not want to overly dramatize his show, I find that commendable. Honestly, even from the beginning of his petty crimes, I'm surprised he was let off so easy, or he just got very lucky, because at age 19, in 1963, he served 3 years in a Paris prison before being paroled, and in 69, he was sent to prison for 8 months for car theft and evading police. And then again in 73, he was arrested and sent to prison for an armed robbery at a jewelry shop in Delhi's Hotel Ashoka, but he borrowed money from his stepfather and fled to Kabul. He then was arrested in Kabul for robbing tourists, but again, he escaped and was on the run for about 2 years. Okay, and then this next one is just absolutely absurd. Like, seriously, this could be a movie all itself. But Sobhraj was joined by his younger half-brother, Andre, in Istanbul. Sobhraj and Andre became partners in crime, participating in various criminal activities in both Turkey and Greece. The duo were eventually arrested in Athens after an identity switch hoax, though. Sobhraj managed to escape, but his half-brother was left behind. Andre was handed over to the Turkish police by Greek authorities and served an 18-year sentence. But ultimately, it was the gruesome murders of innocent people that eventually would lead to an arrest. Let's go back to Kippenberg that we discussed a bit earlier. In 1976, Kippenberg, who again was posted as the third secretary at the Dutch embassy in Bangkok, Thailand, was alerted to a very strange case of two missing Dutch nationals known as Henk Bentanha, age 29, and Cornelia Hemker, age 25, who disappeared while traveling along the hippie trail. Kippenberg had visited a morgue where he saw the corpses of this young Dutch couple who had been brutally murdered and had their bodies set on fire. This case really stuck with Kippenberg, who would actually become fixated on bringing the gruesome killer to justice. Kippenberg had said, quote, "I was confronted with a situation in which innocent people were losing their lives and nobody lifted a finger. I saw that as the complete failure of democracy." When Kippenberg dug deeper, he uncovered a pattern of unsolved murders and disappearances involving travelers and tourists who trekked the hippie trail, and, quote, "It was absolutely imperative to stop the killings. As I have said to friends before, even if it was not in the parameters of my work, if I could make the difference I felt in that moment, I could and I would." This was really the beginning of uncovering who Charles Sobhraj was and ultimately linking him to other similar cases. Since Sobhraj was on the run and was apparently extremely confident in his abilities to run from the law and stay hidden, he knew exactly just how he was going to do this. While living, or should I say hiding out in Thailand, he would pose as a gem salesman and impress and befriend tourists, which is how he got his sidekick or second in command, Ajay. During this time as well, he had a girlfriend, Marie-André Leclerc from Quebec, who was also a tourist looking for a new adventure, and ultimately she just fell completely head over heels for Charles, basically becoming a devoted follower of him, and although she would repeatedly admit that she had no idea of the crimes he was committing, many people find that hard to believe. While Kippenberg began investigating the suspicious death of the young Dutch couple, he was able to make connections with other suspicious deaths as well. The following would turn out to be some of the victims that Kippenberg was able to tie to Charles. The first victim was a 21-year-old woman from Seattle known as Teresa Knowlton. Her body was discovered on October of 1975, where it was believed to originally had been a swimming accident because she was found drowned by a farmer in a tidal pool in the Gulf of Thailand wearing a flowered bikini, hence Charles's nickname as the Bikini Killer. It wouldn't be until months later that forensic evidence would show that it was actually a murder and not a swimming accident. Teresa was in Thailand at the time to explore Buddhist culture and monasteries, and it was said that she was actually on her way to joining a Buddhist monastery when she met Sobhraj.
Hey, there's a party. You guys should both come. Really, it'll be a cool scene. Yep. You know, not like the tourists here.
Why don't you save it for the next two guys you pick up here?
The next two girls won't be you two, though, will they? But there's a pool. Bring your bikinis and we can have a swim. Or don't bring your bikinis and we can have a swim.
Let's drop him. He's a creep.
Celia,
Yeah.
let me tell you where I'm headed.
Yeah?
I'm going to a Buddhist monastery. I was there a year ago and I'm going back, but to live.
What?
Like a nun. Not like actually a nun. There's a whole bunch of things that I don't ever get to do again and I want to do them now.
What, with that guy? If you're sure. Okay.
Hey, you're amazing.
Oh. So you. So you. Okay, cool. Well, have fun.
I'll see you. Yeah, maybe.
Sobrah's second known victim was Vitaly Hakim, a young Sephardic Jewish boy whose body was found charred near Pattaya, where the Serpent was staying on the east coast of the Gulf of Thailand. This part is really sad as well because his girlfriend had actually come looking for Hakim, and her name was Charmaine Carew. Her body as well was later found drowned and wearing a similar styled swimsuit to that of Sobhraj's earlier victim, Teresa Knowlton. She would have actually been the fourth victim after the Dutch couple Batanha and Hemker were found. On December 18th, the day the bodies of Batanha and Hemker were identified, Sobhraj and Leclerc entered Nepal using the deceased couple's passports. Laurent Armand Carrière, who was 26 from Canada, was murdered in Nepal along with American woman Connie Bronsick, who was 29, and in December of 1975, Connie and Laurent were murdered by Sobhraj, and their bodies were found in separate locations, badly charred and with multiple stab wounds. Connie and her companion were apparently killed over some gemstones that Connie had purchased in India. Sobhraj and Leclerc traveled back to Thailand using Laurent and Connie's passports shortly after killing them. It was at this time that Charles had begun to become suspected of serial killing, so he felt the need to flee yet again back to India. Upon returning to India, he then murdered Israeli student Avani Jacob to steal his passport, using it to travel to Singapore with Chowdhury and Leclerc. Sobhraj used the passport to travel with Leclerc and Chowdhury, first to Singapore, then to India, and in March 76, returning to Bangkok, despite knowing that the authorities there were looking for him. The clan were interrogated by the Thai police in connection with the murders, but they ended up being released. The criminal trio's next stop was Malaysia, where Chowdhury was sent to steal gems. Chowdhury was observed delivering the gems to Sobhraj, but this was the last time he would ever be seen. Neither him nor his remains have ever been found, and it is believed that Sobhraj murdered his former accomplice before leaving Malaysia in order to continue his and Leclerc's roles as gem dealers in Geneva. A source later claimed to have sighted Chowdhury in West Germany, but the claim appeared unsubstantiated, so the search for Chowdhury continues. So till this day, we don't really know what happened to Ajay Chowdhury, whether he was murdered or is in hiding. But back in Thailand, though, thanks to Kippenberg not giving up on linking Charles to the deaths of those found in Thailand, in May of 76, Interpol issued an international arrest warrant for Sobhraj, which charged him with 4 murders in Thailand. Meanwhile, though, while he was wanted for arrest in Thailand, Charles was in India, where by this time he was forming some kind of following, or rather a family, comprising of 2 Western women, Barbara Smith and Mary Ellen Ether, on top of his wife Leclerc, still supporting him, but he was using them to basically be his new accomplices for crimes. They targeted their next victim, Jean-Luc Solomon, who Sobhraj drugged in a hotel in order to rob him, but while they were just trying to make him unconscious, they ended up drugging him, causing him to die. Soon after this, in 1976, while this literally sounds straight out of a movie, Sobhraj and his family tricked a tour group of French postgraduate students into accepting them as tour guides. Sobhraj drugged them, giving them all poison pills, which he told them were anti-dysentery medicine.
It is perfection. I don't know how many of them there are, but this is more than 30. And all of their valuables, their passports, their money, all of it in only one bag in the care of only one couple, their professor and his wife. We'll have a chance to see this. It's as if the world decided, reached out to me and said, they're yours. Take them.
30 in one swoop, that's far out. I mean, the French guy.
If I say it will succeed, it will succeed.
When the drugs took effect more quickly than Sobhraj had anticipated, the students began to fall unconscious one by one. 3 of the students, though, realizing what Sobhraj had done, overpowered him and contacted the police, leading to his capture. Sobhraj's accomplices, Smith and Ether, confessed during interrogation as well. Okay, the fact that he tricked and drugged an entire group of students is crazy, but it's even more crazy to know that Sobhraj escaped from India's jail in 1986 after serving 10 years of his sentence by drugging prison guards with cookies and cakes laced with sleeping pills. If you're wondering how exactly that was able to happen, well, it's said that Sobhraj basically lived a life of luxury while being incarcerated because he still had access to a TV and gourmet food because he befriended the guards and prisoners, because I guess he had entered the prison with precious gems that he concealed in his body and used that to bribe those around him. Well, because of how close he was to all of them, in March of 1986, in his 10th year in prison, Sobhraj threw a big party for the guards and fellow inmates, drugged them with sleeping pills, and then just walked straight out of the prison. And remember, this is by no means the first time he escaped prison. Like, it definitely shouldn't be that easy to escape prison. But to recap, one, in Greece, he convinced his adoring younger brother to swap identities and serve his sentence after they had robbed a businessman who later recognized Sobhraj on a plane. 2, in India, after holding a flamenco dancer hostage while robbing a Delhi hotel jewelry store, he'd faked an appendicitis in prison and then escaped. Fortunately, police arrested Sobhraj days later at a restaurant in the Indian beach holiday state of Goa. He ended up getting 10 years added to his sentence, which he served that out, but it's said that he purposely escaped just to get arrested again and get more prison time because his prison sentence in India was due to end before the 20-year Thai statute of limitations expired, which would mean he would be extradited and almost certainly executed for murder in Thailand. And on February 17th of 97, 52-year-old Sobhraj was released with most warrants, evidence, and even witnesses against him long lost. Without any country to extradite him to, Indian authorities let him return to France. Meanwhile, during his prison time, his wife Leclerc, while she too was also imprisoned, she was later released after receiving a compassionate leave after being diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and in 1983 she went back home to Canada where sadly she passed away at age 38. Since his release from the Nepal prison after serving 20 years, while he was living in Paris, he lived like a celebrity. He charged large sums of money for interviews and photographs. The rights to a film based on his life were sold for over $15 million. Now, this story does not end there. Told you guys this was a big case. In 2003, Charles decided to go back to Nepal mainly to set up some kind of business investment, but some will say it was because Charles was a very egotistical man that he became overly confident in feeling like he was untouchable. But I'm not actually sure if he knew this or not, but Nepal was one of the only countries that still had an arrest warrant out for him. For the 1975 double murder in Nepal of Connie Bronsick and Laurent Carrière. He received a life sentence in August of 2004 and would serve 19 years of a 20-year sentence. It's said that he got married to a woman named Nahida Biswas, a Nepali national, and 44 years his junior in 2008 while he was still behind bars.
He's so caring to the people around him. So that again grew more in love with him. So like every day I love him more. So knowing him every day, it's like a better thing I do. I spend more time. And yeah, at last finally, he did not even like ask me to marry. It was just decided, it was just like talking glances. So we were quite ready and yeah, we got engaged. And yeah, now like we don't have to talk about some like marriage settling. It is always there. And but yet we are planning for future that after his release, because we know that he's going to release soon.
And in 2022, just last year, on December 21st, Nepal's top court ordered the release of Sobhraj from prison on health grounds. He was freed on December 23rd and was ultimately deported back to France. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me back here for another episode of Crime and Wine. I always have so much fun going over these cases with you, so please leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know if you've watched this show and if you liked it, or if you haven't watched it yet, let me know if you plan to watch it now after today's case. But otherwise, please hit the like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you guys back here next week for another episode of Crime and Wine.